My name is Jasmine Sky, and I'm here today with a publishing talk video. I'm here to talk about querying. For those who don't know, querying is the process of finding a literary agent so that you can become traditionally published, which is my dream. I would love to be traditionally published and see my books in bookstores and all of that. So today I'm going to be giving you 5 tips on surviving the query trenches. So I'm a writer. I've been writing creatively since the 4th or 5th grade, somewhere in that time frame. I finished my first full-length novel in 2012, and since then I have written 5 more, and I have started dozens of other projects. And I have been querying now for about 16 months. 16 months, you say? Well, 16 months really isn't that bad. Being in the query trenches is not a short process. There are so many authors who query for years before they land an agent, which leads me to my first tip, and that is set your expectations low. I was one of those people who set my expectations too high when I started querying. My first novel that I felt was query ready was called Kingfisher, or is still called Kingfisher. I love Kingfisher still. I think it's a great novel. I think it has an epic climax. It's just a standalone fantasy novel, and I had really high hopes that it was a book that would get me an agent really fast and get me a book deal, and I would start my career. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. I have shelved Kingfisher for now. I am considering what else I can do with that book, maybe transitioning it from a young adult to an adult novel, but for now I have to just move on from it. I queried it for almost exactly a year, so I started querying it in January of last year and stopped querying it in January of this year. And in that time, I queried over 80 agents, which is a lot, and perhaps more than you should query before you shelve a project, but we'll get to that. Unfortunately, because my expectations were so high, I was really crushed with all the initial rejections. And some of those initial rejections had nothing to do with the novel. They just had to do with me not knowing how to write a solid query letter. But also there are aspects of that novel that just don't make it a good fit for querying. It is a slow start, and that does not work well for finding a literary agent, because literary agents get so many queries. Lauren Spieler of Triada US said that she gets 20 to 30 queries a day. That's crazy. And you have to remember that literary agents' whole job is not just to go through their slush pile and respond to queries. Their primary job is to work with the clients they already have and get them book deals and help them edit up their novels and things like that. So the querying is just a subsection of their day-to-day life, and a lot of agents aren't literary agents full-time because until they get a client who lands a very big book deal, they cannot afford to live because they only get 15%. So a lot of literary agents have other jobs, which means working with their clients is their primary duty when they're outside of their full-time job, and then querying is the subsidiary of that. So we as querying authors have to remember to be patient to literary agents and to remember that in a lot of ways we're on the bottom of their totem pole, and that's okay. But that is definitely one of the things that factors into why this is such a long and hard process. So there are a lot of ways for you to sort of give yourself a leg up and make sure that your story is heard or is evaluated fairly in the process. And one of those is just to write a good query letter, something that I failed on with my first few drafts of a query letter with Kingfisher. But there are a lot of really good books that even if they have an amazing query letter, even if they have really good first pages and they capture agent attention, sometimes they just don't land an agent, or sometimes they land an agent, but then they don't land an editor. So when you've decided that you want to be an author, especially if you want to be a career author, you really need to set your expectations low, and you really need to settle in for the campaign, not just the battle. Which brings me to my second tip, which is that when you're querying, you should always be working on the next thing. Now, when you've just started querying and it's very exciting and you're putting in a lot of effort into finding agents and sending out those queries, of course, I'm not saying that you should necessarily be in the middle of drafting your next project. That doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work for me. I always need to take a bit of a break between projects so that I can refill my well and start world building and plotting in the back of my mind for whatever that next project is going to be. But it is very important that you have another project that you're starting to consider so that you have something to look forward to if your first project or your second project, etc., doesn't land you an agent. So for me, like I said, I stopped querying Kingfisher after about a year. Now in November of 2019, so this last November, I did start writing a new project. I started writing other new projects before that, but none of them became full-length novels. None of them really captured my attention enough for me to finish them. So I had a lot of false starts in 2018 and spring of 2019. But I did eventually land on an idea that did work for me, and I wrote the first draft of that for NaNoWriMo 2019. I finished the second draft for that in March, and then I finished the third draft for that earlier this month. Now, I did start querying this project in March because I wanted to participate in a querying event, and then I went back and did a third draft because I realized there was more that I could fix to make it an even stronger project for querying. So far, I've only queried 16 agents, and I still have many more on my list, but not 80. But the main point is that I'd had another project ready when I stopped querying my last project, or close to, and next time I'm not gonna wait as long. I don't even think I'm gonna wait until Nano before drafting the first draft of my next project. So I think it's really important that you always are thinking about what's next, what you're excited about. And another really important thing is not to draft the next in the series if what you're querying is a series. Kingfisher was a standalone, so I didn't have that problem. But my current project, which the working title is Shackles of Bone, and it's a YA historical fantasy witches and shapeshifters novel, which I also find to be a bit hookier and perhaps a bit more marketable than Kingfisher, which is another good thing to consider if you're trying to become a career author. You need to consider which of your ideas that you're still very excited to write. You shouldn't just write for the market, but of your ideas, consider the ones that are the most marketable and are the most flashy and might get you agent and editor interest, because once you have that relationship with an agent and an editor, then you can kind of work on your more niche stories, but you need to start with something that is really going to capture their attention. So anyway, I think Shackles of Bone is more marketable and a bit flashier, but it still might not be the one that gets me an agent. I might have to go to book 3, book 4, but Shackles is the first of a series, or at least it has series potential, and I want it to be a series, but I'm not going to be writing book 2 as my next project because I don't know if and when Shackles would ever get published. So I have to start on another project that I can query if Shackles fails to get me an agent. So this brings me to my third tip, which is query smart. So I said that 80 agents was too many, and the reason for that is that a fair number of those 80 agents that I queried were not actually good fits for Kingfisher. I just sent my query out to any agent that said they represented young adult and fantasy, and that probably landed me across the desks of a lot of people who I wouldn't have been a good fit with anyway. And luckily, I never had the situation where I did get an offer and had to turn it down, or had to accept an offer with an agent that would end up being a bad fit. People like to say, and I agree with them, that a bad agent is worse than no agent. So it's much better to have a smaller, more curated list of literary agents that you honestly believe will be a good fit for you. And that's what I did with Shackles. I really narrowed down my list and I chose literary agents that I would honestly be thrilled to work with if any of them were interested in Shackles, and hopefully my other novels, because the point of a literary agent is hopefully to find someone who will stick with you throughout your career. Now, there's lots of career authors who have to go through multiple agents, but right now I'm hoping to find an agent who will stick with me for a good many years, and that means being very careful about the people that I'm querying and understanding that if Shackles is not the one that gets me that agent, that's okay, because I'd rather have one of those really good for me agents than an agent that isn't as good for me. Now, there's a lot of other aspects that go into querying smart, related to curating your list, writing a good query letter, making sure your first pages are catchy, all of that. So if you want me to do a query tips video, I'm happy to do that. There's also a lot of resources. I'll link a couple resources in the description below for other people who have talked about good querying tips so that you can see that if you're interested. But the main thing is to do your research. Do your research in terms of how to query well, do your research on the agents, and things like that. Another aspect that goes into that is to search for opportunities. There's lots of agents who do query critique giveaways. There's lots of events like Pitch Wars and Author Mentor Match that are designed to match you with a mentor so that you can work on bringing your project to that next level and then have help with querying it afterwards. And there's also pitch events that happen at conventions when convention season happens again, and that happen online. So one of my favorite things to do is to do Twitter pitch events. There's so many different Twitter pitch events. One of the biggest is called Pit Mad. There's also ones like SFF Pit, DV Pit, Pit Dark, lots of events that are a little bit more specialized than Pit Mad. Pit Mad goes for any and all books that you're trying to query. Now, the way that these Twitter pitch events works is that you tweet out a pitch for your book or multiple pitches for your book, and if an agent likes that tweet, then you send them your query, and it elevates you a little bit over the other queries in their inbox because they already said that they liked the basic concept that they saw in your tweet. Does this always land you an agent? No. Is the agent that likes your tweet always a good fit for you? No, you should always research the agent, even if they've liked your tweet. You should definitely research them and see if you think they would honestly be a good fit. I have found several agents who I had not seen before that I was like, oh, this is an amazing agent through these pitch events, and I was very excited to query them. But there have been other agents who've liked my tweets that honestly were not great fits. And for Kingfisher, I queried them anyway because I just queried everyone, and that wasn't a good thing for me to do. But for Shackles, I'm being a little bit more selective, as I said. So again, query smart because that's going to be better for you in the end. And that wraps into be working on your next project, because if you know that you have another chance after this novel, then you won't be as fervent about querying anyone no matter what, because you know that you have another chance to query those agents you think would honestly be a good fit. Remember, this is only the first battle in a long war, and your agent needs to be your base commander, your field medic, your brother in arms. They're there for you. They get money when you get money. You need to make sure you can have a really good relationship with that agent. And this doesn't just mean agents that you think you'd be good friends with. This means agents that you would be able to work well with. And that's not always the same thing, though I do think it is good to be friends or friendly with your agent and have a good relationship with them. But what do I know? I don't have an agent yet. So moving on. Tip number 4 is to find query buddies. This is really important. Querying can sometimes feel really arduous, really tedious, really disheartening because you're gonna get a lot of rejections. Even the best books get tons of rejections because writing is very subjective, and querying is especially subjective because agents are just going to find the project that is the right fit for them. There's a lot of agents who look at books that they think are amazing, but that don't really light that spark in them, so they don't offer representation to that author, which is why even if your book is really good, if you don't find that one agent who really understands it, you might not get an offer of representation, or you might get an offer of representation that you don't actually want to take. So again, long battle, and you just need to keep throwing your darts on the dartboard until you hit that bullseye. Now, finding other people who are in that battle with you is so important because these are the people who you can share resources with, who you can work with to edit up your query letter and your first pages, and who can give you support when you get those really terrible rejections, or who can celebrate with you when you get a full request, etc., etc. For me, I have several critique partner friends who are also querying, so that was really good for me to have that resource. But I also went ahead and joined a Twitter group of other querying friends, and they have been an invaluable resource. We communicate with each other through Twitter direct messages, so it's a really safe space for us to ask questions, to gossip, to celebrate, and give each other virtual hugs. And I really recommend finding spaces like that. Twitter is a great resource for querying authors and for authors in general. It's probably the best social media platform for an author or future author to be on and to create a presence on at this point in time. But definitely for querying authors like myself, it's really a great place for you to find that community that hopefully you can stick with and be debuts together and continue to have relationships with into the future. But on that note, my 5th and final tip is to control your envy. It is very easy for that little green-eyed monster inside you to get upset when you see people who maybe started querying at the same time as you or started querying after you get their agents, get their book deals. This is never going to go away. Your peers are potentially going to see better success than you. There's always someone who's going to see better success than you. They're gonna get a book deal at a more prestigious publishing house. They're gonna get a better advance. They're gonna get screen adaptation. Everyone feels a little bit of envy. That's normal, but you can't let it sour those relationships. You have to support each other. One of my critique partners just got an agent, and I am so happy for her. And of course, there's a little part of me that's like, well, what about me? I want my agent, but she's been querying for 4 years, so she definitely deserved it, and that's okay. But if one of my critique partners who started querying after me gets an agent, I need to have the same kind of excitement for that person as I do for this critique partner. So it's very important that you learn to assess your own feelings and control them so that they don't negatively impact you. So make sure that you always refocus on yourself and what you're proud about in your own writing. In the end of the day, you're always going to have disappointments in the writing field. It never goes away. So you need to make sure that the books you write are books that you're proud of, books that you will love to reread, books that are a gift to someone that would honestly appreciate them. You can't write for your potential future audience, because if it's not something that you honestly enjoy, then those disappointments are going to hurt all the more. For myself, I do believe I'm a talented writer. I have a master's degree in it, and yet I haven't gotten an agent yet. I might not get an agent for another couple years, and that's just the name of the game. This industry is so subjective, but the main thing is that I have written books that I enjoy, that I don't regret. You need to make sure that you can quantify success for yourself and not externally so that you can continue on with this game. So with that, those were all 5 of my tips on surviving the query trenches. I'd love to talk with you guys in the comments if there's anyone else who's dealing with the query trenches. Happy to talk about other things related to publishing and querying if you want. So go ahead and comment down below, like, subscribe, all of that. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.